Hey, this is Christy Mattoon here from Mind Rewire. I'm starting a new series today that's going to be on my YouTube channel called Do You Want to Hear Something Amazing? And it's just stuff that I've either come across or read too much into. I have no idea sometimes, but I always find things to confirm it. And so this is one of those things that I'm just like kind of standing here staggered and blown away at some of the information I'm seeing. So this particular video is going to be on the Lord's Prayer, the seven heavens, and the chakra system, or the energy centers, depending on what you call them. And a little bit of understanding and a deeper dive into all of that. I will try and keep this short because I know that's always better. But if I don't make it through the shortness of it, and you want to hear something amazing, stick with me here. So what we're going to start with, first of all, is the basic Lord's Prayer. I'm going to take some information out of Greg Braden's book, The Wisdom Codes, because he's put a lot of work into finding things out and understanding things. And he's just got a really good depiction of this in here. So what we're looking for here is original words. What we're looking for here is truth and understanding. What we're looking for here is why something that should be so powerful doesn't seem to do a lot for Christianity today. And some people would yell at me and say that that's not correct, but my own witnessing of the Christian group or era that I grew up in was that this wasn't very effective, and that the Lord's Prayer actually was not looked on as far as sacred words. It was just a way that Yeshua was teaching his disciples and the people around him to potentially pray, right? And then we didn't do it. So that was awesome. And I'm not downplaying any religious whatever, so don't think I am. I am just merely saying there's more here than meets the eye, and we have to start finding that out. So Jesus' original words were basically in Aramaic. They were not in English. So obviously we have to translate stuff, and we lose meaning in translation. Not just because we don't have words for it, but because our American words, our English words don't mean much. Right? I call it a dead language, even though the technical meaning for a dead language isn't that. But English doesn't mean a whole lot. The words themselves don't mean a whole lot. They've lost their narrative meaning. They've lost, because of the way we use them, because of the lack of sacred space or energy we put into them, they lose their meaning. Which means they can also gain sacred space and energy, right, by the person using them, which is what makes words powerful, yes? So the original Lord's Prayer was very simple, actually, and I want to read this a bit to you out of what Greg Braden says here. He's teaching it as a protective power. I think it was more than that. I think it energizes your system. That's where the chakras come in. And I think it elevates you into different heavens, which is where the idea of the seven heavens come in. And I'm going to pull all of this together as I go through this. Let me find this part that I'm looking for here. The original words were, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so on earth. That's the most ancient text that he can find for the Lord's Prayer, the oldest, right? It's in the Aramaic Gospel. Called the Gospel Q, which actually was the word quell, which means source in German, but the scholars typically shortened it to the Gospel Q. So that's where he found this. There are other versions that were discovered intact that were in jars. One of those was in the Nag Hammadi in the Egyptian village in 1945. And then also another in the Dead Sea Scrolls that were discovered intact in the Quorum caves of the Judean desert in the 1940s and early 50s. So the text itself is understood to be a standalone text. It doesn't need anything else surrounding it. It doesn't need any other reference. It doesn't need any other information surrounding it. The text alone, the verse alone, is a standalone, very powerful thing when you start to understand how it works and what it actually is. So we're going to use that as our kind of jumping point, right? There's many different, and if you Google the Lord's Prayer, you're going to get all kinds of different versions, because that's what we do. Is people will say, oh, let's, add this, take this out. The original Lord's Prayer that I was taught had an ending to it. And I'm trying to remember how it went, because the three I have in front of me do not have it on it. But it was, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Forgive us our transgressions as we forgive those who transgress against us. Give us this day our daily bread. Keep us from evil, for thine is the will, or for in thine will the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. That last part was never in any original text. Some of the ones, and it's kind of like they were updated. As they were updated, they were given new words to it. But that last part is not found in any of the original ancient texts. I'm going to move over here to, let me see if I can pull this up, Edgar Cayce's Lord's Prayer. If you know who Edgar Cayce is, very, very interesting fellow. And we want to use this example here. His Lord's Prayer says, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so on earth, same as Greg Braden's. Give us for tomorrow the needs of the body, which would be give us this day our daily bread. Forget those trespasses as we forgive those who have trespassed and do trespass against us. So forgiveness, right? For self and for others. Be thou the guide in time of trouble, turmoil, and temptation. Lead us into paths of righteousness for thine own name's sake, or for thine name's sake. Now, I've read this in other translations. Instead of it saying, do not lead us into temptation, right? So it says two different things here. Do not lead us into temptation versus lead us into paths of righteousness. Like, which would you rather say? So much more powerful if you're thinking down the path of strength and down the path of higher vibration. It's very interesting. And in the original version, the very shortest version that Greg Braden had written in here, it doesn't have any of that in it at all. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so on earth. Pretty simple, right? So tons of stuff have been added to this. And I love the part, lead us into paths of righteousness versus do not lead us into temptation. The last part here says, Lord, use me in the way and manner in which I may be a better channel and a greater service to thee in the earth now. All right. So some of this stuff, the way it's written, you're thinking you're asking, no matter what version you look at, it's like you're asking about it. You're asking for it. You're asking. And I've heard people pray this prayer almost in a pleading, right? As if they're pleading kind of way. All right. So we don't want to plead when we do this. As Edgar Cayce says, the end of his now, right? Bring it to fruition now. And it's a command. You're giving a command in faith that you have the ability to bring forth that which you're asking, right? All right, so we're going to talk about the seven heavens. And I want to show you this. So I just now Googled seven heavens in Bible, right? This is easy. You can Google this stuff and just get information. Be open and curious. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Be open and curious to what you're looking at. And it has all these questions. What are the seven levels of Johanna? Are there different levels of heaven? What are the names of the three heavens? So there's so many different ideas here, first of all. The one I was reading earlier, and I just found this super interesting, is from Compelling Truth. Thank you, Compelling Truth, for putting information out there for us. Where does the idea of seven heavens come from? Is the idea of seven heavens even biblical? So biblical meaning the Roman Catholic Bible, the one that you were taught to read probably as a child if you were taught to read one. So you can read through this. The mythology of seven heavens is ancient, meaning it's probably spoken about in other languages, in other places, in other lands. And it doesn't mean that because it's ancient, and he used the word mythology here, in their teachings it wasn't mythological. In their teaching, it was what they understood, right? It was what they were taught, what they knew. So here it's related to the planets, So astrology, and if you came from the kind of teachings I came from in Christendom, we were taught not to look into the heavens, even though it clearly states in the Torah portion, in the older part of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, and so on, to look to the heavens for information. When something changes in the stars, God's talking to you. And we were taught that was evil, which is strange and weird. Right, as you scroll through here, he gives account of all kinds of different things. And even giving scripture as to the different planets, Mercury in Isaiah, Venus in Samuel, Mars in Kings, right? Just interesting that that's in there. And no matter what you were taught, open, curious mind, please have an open and curious mind with this stuff. So you can go on and read through this. It's about the 7 heavens from the Hindu, right? Because they had it in their writings. And then in Judaism, right, 7 heavens, that's where our Christian Bible comes from. So we're going to kind of take a look at this one real quick because it's just interesting. The Hebrew word for heaven, Shemayim, is only ever plural. The Hebrew word for heaven is a plural word all the time, right? So there's different traditions that have different numbers of heaven. If you're familiar with the Zohar, this is Kabbalistic teaching. They claim that there's over 390 heavens and 70,000 different worlds. And this idea of different worlds would pertain to the quantum idea that all these different dimensions are playing out simultaneously. All your different lives are playing out simultaneously across the scope of what we would consider time. But all at the same time, in the present moment, here and now. It's not like a past and a future. It's all happening at once. And it's kind of trippy, right? Jewish, right here it says, Jewish scholars say Paul's trip into the 3rd heaven is an example of one of these places. Did he go into another dimension? Did he go right into one of the levels of heaven that Jesus is talking about? And I'll get to that here in just a second. All right, so anyway, I want you to find this stuff and just, if you find it interesting, find it and read it. All right, so here's it's compellingtruth.org is the one I'm reading right here. I just find it interesting, and that's what I want you to see in this. So we're going to move on from there. And what I want you to know, and what I'm reading from now, I want you to see this. So the first book I was taking information from was Greg Braden's Wisdom Codes. I've done a series on his. I actually need to finish. This book is called The Law of Light, The Secret Teachings of Jesus by Lars Mohl. All right, can you see that? That's what this is, where this is from. And as I was reading this the other day, I was like, oh, no way. It's starting to make some sense. So I'm on I'm on page 76, The Serpent, the Dove, and the Complete Human Being. So this is teachings that are not in the Roman Catholic Bible, right, or not in our Bible. It's not in there. Like, I don't know, they left it out. Whatever you think about this stuff, right? It wasn't put in there. And so this is just really interesting to me. I'm going to read part of this to you. It says, when Yeshua says, whatsoever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever you loose on earth will also be loosed in heaven, is a direct call to us to release and transform the forces that are bound to the serpent's province. What we bind or release there will in the same way be bound or released in the dove's province. The serpent's province being the lower, right, being the worldly, the dove's province being the heavenly. If you think about chakras, and so I'm going to click on this real fast. If you think about chakras, and again, I want you to Google this. There is a ton of information on this. Right? These are all different chakra charts. I Googled chakra and then clicked on images. I Googled chakra and then clicked on images. Super simple. Go read about it. If you don't know about this stuff, go take a look at it. There are so many different ideas and philosophies on it. The gist of it is that you have energy centers in your body that send energy through your system. Right? It's what creates your electromagnetic biome, or the circle of energy around you. I'm trying to think of the name. Read Joe Dispenza's work, right? He gets a ton into this kind of stuff, and it's super fascinating. But when you have this kind of energy flowing through you, it's a toroidal field. It creates a toroidal field around your body. It's a donut-shaped field. The heart being the biggest part of that field. It sends out energy up to 9 feet around you. And when you understand this and how these actually work, you start trying to light them up and, you know, be there with them. And it's just super interesting. There's a lot of different teachings, and I do some of them too, on how to turn on your chakras and how to open up your energy field so that they're producing more energy, and it helps heal and make you feel better. All right. So I want you to go Google that, look at it if you don't know what they are. And here's where I'm going to continue through this. So ancient teachings of Jesus, these would be considered the mystery teachings, right? Understanding that Jesus was not just in Judah and Israel in the Middle Eastern world. He traveled around. He traveled into Egypt. He traveled into India. He was considered an Essene. He was considered an Essene, which is like a pre-Christian group of people who knew these secrets about the physical body, and they knew the secrets of the heavens, and they talked to the angels because they were right there on earth with them. There was no denying it. There was no misinterpreting it because they were right there with you. And so these are some of those teachings. Here's what's said. And again, this is out of The Law of Light by Lars Muehl. The first heaven, so now we're back to the idea of the 7 heavens. The first heaven corresponds to the 7th heaven. The first heaven is your root chakra, or your root energy center. It's right at your pelvic floor, the perineum. Corresponds to the 7th heaven, which is the crown. We're going to bring all this back to the Lord's Prayer in here just a minute. The second heaven, which is right above the root, right? If you go look up a chart, you'll see where this is the sacral chakra. Corresponds to the 6th heaven, which is your third eye, or at your brow. The third heaven, which is your solar plexus, right underneath your rib cage, corresponds to your throat. The fourth heaven, the heart, corresponds directly to the heavenly source. It's where your spirit lives. It's where angels will meet you. It's where you get extraterrestrial information, if you will. Right? It's just interesting. It's your projection about yourself and not about the world around you. It's your presentation of your eternal internal self. Okay? I'm going to go on and read a little bit more here. Just as Moses exalted the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be exalted, says Yeshua. Just as Moses released his Kundalini force and was enlightened by this means, so will the fully incarnate human being, the whole human being, the enlightened, Mary Magdalene, the exalted. So in the physical, or in the Roman Catholic Bible, we're taught that Mary Magdalene was just a peasant girl. Some understandings say that she was a whore. All kinds of weird stuff. The way she was talked about. The truth of it is, in some of the more ancient teachings, which came out of texts that were found in different places of the world, was that she was exalted. She was taught what she knew. She was in an order called the Marys. And all of these Marys were initiates into this type of a practice. They knew God. They knew how this operated. They knew how it worked. And she was selected because of her knowledge to bear the Christ consciousness, the Christ child. This is actually saying that Miriam the Magdalene, the exalted, is therefore a metaphor for that spark of latent wisdom in ourselves. She is a spark of latent wisdom inside of us, who Moses knew needed to be exalted before he could burn purely to fully enlighten mankind. Crazy interesting information. I was never taught this stuff. Right? So the 7 heavens correspond directly to your chakra system and to the energy centers. So now, I want you to, we're going to take a look at this really quickly here, because this is just another interesting piece. I have this link where this came from, and I'll stick this wording underneath it so you can match it up in the below area, in the section below this video. So when we take a look back at the Lord's Prayer in English. Let's try and get some of it back into the Aramaic. Inside this, the content below, you'll also find another link to another video of a person who's actually speaking the Aramaic translation of the Lord's Prayer. And you just have to sit there. I would say get into heart coherence and sit there and just listen to it, to the words, to the flow. It doesn't come across the same as when you say it in English. It just doesn't. In Aramaic, the words had more meaning than just one. In Aramaic, it was a feeling, it was an image, it was an understanding, and it went way beyond what we look at as what we think our words mean, right? Because you can say the word love in English. Let's be purely honest here. You can say the word love in English to somebody and it means nothing. It means nothing anymore. I was actually part of a church in California, and one of their leaders, beautiful, beautiful person, would walk by and ask, hey, how you doing? Touch your shoulder. And then as you were saying, oh, I'm okay, I'm not okay, whatever you were going to say, she would go, okay, love you, and she would just keep walking. And this is one of the leaders of the church. She would just keep walking, love you, I love you. And I remember thinking in my head the last few times I heard her say that, no, you don't. You don't even know who I am. Like, you don't even, your love falls flat. That happens a lot because of the words that we use and the way we use it. It's not sincere. It's not spoken, right, in a feeling. It's only spoken in the verbal form. All right, so understanding words, right? Translations from different languages. And this gets way deeper than this. This is just a taste. All right, so you can look up this guy, Klotz. Look up his work. Very interesting, very cool work. His translation, this guy that wrote this says, his translation opened my mind to a fresher love and healing paradigm taught by Jesus. For example, the Lord's Prayer begins with Our Father. A translation of the word Abba, right? So Our Father is Abba. If you're in the Christian world, you know this. Abba means Father. But the actual Aramaic transliteration is Abwoon, A-B-W-O-O-N, which is a blending of Abba, Father, and woon, womb, coming from the feminine energy, coming from the female side. Jesus' recognition of the masculine and feminine source of creation come out in this statement. But we translated it, because of who was translating it, into Our Father, meaning only masculine, leaving out the feminine and cutting the human person into pieces. So when you speak this prayer, start with the word of wound and let it resonate in your system. Say it like you feel it. See if you can see the masculine and feminine, right? In some teachings, it's the Shekinah glory is the feminine energy of God. The Shekinah glory, right? And if you go back to using, whatever name of God you use, there's so many of them, Elohim, Eli, I don't know, take them, take anyone you want and use the Shekinah glory, the feeling of that glory coming into you. That is the feminine version, right? It's also called Sophia, the Sophia energy, the Sophia feminine part of the masculine. So you've got both parts, right? And this is just interesting to me that it's brought up here. So we've got the 7 layers of heaven. We've got the chakra system. We've got the Lord's Prayer. How did this all fit together? I have a video posted below of a lady that's going through, and please just go look at it because I think it's fantastic. Her explanation was kind of interesting, and so it drew me in. I won't say kind of, it did draw me in. She did have an older version of the prayer that she was working through. I'm going to give you another version that I absolutely love. This comes out of Sid Ross at Supernatural. He had the Bible, and his scholars totally rewrite it and get it back to the closest language he could. So out of Luke 11, his version of it says, Father, your name must now be sanctified. Your kingdom must now come. You must continually give us day by day the things necessary for our existence. You must immediately forgive our sins, for we ourselves also forgive everything owing to us. and do not lead us into trial. That's it, right? And instead of it sounding like a begging prayer, like you're asking for God to do it, you're commanding it be done, right? Your name must now be sanctified, and it's on you to do it. Your kingdom must now come, and it's on you to do it. How do you do that? In this prayer. And let's go back to the law of light here. In this prayer, the first heaven is the root. The seventh heaven is the crown. So it starts with our Father at the crown. Our Father, Abwoon, if you use both feminine and masculine. Abwoon, at the crown. In heaven, third eye, right? So the lady on the video may do this a little bit different, but this is my understanding of it. In heaven, third eye. Hallowed be thy name. The voice, right? Your ability to speak and to use the names of God, or to use your language, use your words to sanctify and to bring forth that which is. Your voice, right? So the third part is in your voice. Thy kingdom must now come, as it says in this one, and thy kingdom come, thy will be done. What is the will of God? That you be healthy, you be whole, and you prosper. Pretty simple. That's in your heart space. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. So as you're reading through this, try and feel it in these areas. And the last part in Greg Braden's says, as in heaven, so on earth, meaning the root. Right? As in heaven, so on earth. And this is the idea of the Kundalini awakening. This is when the serpent and the dove come up through the system and light everything up and turn your whole system functionally on. If you read through the ones that say, give us this day our daily bread, and she'll show you in this video, that would be your solar plexus, right, where the stomach is. But it's not talking about food of this earth. It's talking about the manna of God. It's talking about the food that fell on Moses in the desert and his people. It's talking about the food that's, I think, is referred to also in Revelations, the food of the angels, right? And that food, what we think it does is actually spark something in the human body that helps with transfiguration. It helps with your ascension process. If you could only get hold of the manna of God. So give us this day our daily bread. There's also another thought form that says that daily bread is the daily word. It's the understanding. It's your ability to talk and listen to the angels, or listen inside your heart space to even your own spirit, which has direct communication with God. All right. So give us this day our daily bread would be here. In some of the translations, let me see if I can go back to Edgar Cayce's here. Forgive us our, forget those trespasses as we forgive those that trespass against us. That would be your sacral. That would be your sacral. Be thy guide in the time of trouble, temptation, and turmoil. That would be your root, right? And the root and the crown are connected. The root and the crown become one. So the root and the crown become one. And I didn't finish this video earlier. That's why my jacket's different. And I wanted to get this finished and get it posted. The root and the crown become one. And this is where, as in heaven, so on earth. Right? And that is the Kundalini awakening. As in heaven, so on earth. And you get the movement up through the system of this great amount of energy that just changes you. It can be an instantaneous healing. It can be all kinds of things. What I know at this point about this prayer, when it's said religiously, when it's said over and over, right, the frequent fervent prayer kind of idea, when it's said over and over with this in mind, and even if you're touching the points as you're saying it, you're going through it, and you're feeling it, hearing it, really blessing yourself and being a part of it, it not only is a prayer of protection, it's a prayer that forgives. It forgives others. It forgives yourself. It's a prayer that takes you into a different space. It's a prayer that raises your vibration. It's a prayer that alters you as a person. There's nothing else it can do but that. And my recommendation would be start saying it, memorize a version of it, and just say it as often as you possibly can, especially in times of turmoil. especially in times when you feel like you're about to get upset. And you have to start to train yourself to be in that space where you recognize, hey, this is a good place to pull this in. So it protects, it cleanses, it clears, it raises your vibration. It brings in blessings that can't even be understood. The deep, deep, deep subconscious wounds get changed by this prayer when it's spoken frequently and fervently. Okay, and that's a key to it. I hate to say this, there is no magic pill. You have to do something on a regular basis to alter who you are as a human, especially if you're trying to ascend or change this physical life around you, because you're not about this physical stuff. You're about this internal stuff. And this is a huge piece of it. I hope this helps. I'm sorry it was so long. I know it was way longer than I intended for it to be. But if you have questions, post them below. I always love to talk about this kind of stuff. If you have other ideas or thoughts or things that you think I missed, say something in the captions below. I do respond to those. Bless you. Thank you for being here. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much.